Hi. We already have began the second book of the Torah, the book of Shemot, and we're on Parashat Va'era. Please do not confuse with Va'era. That belongs to back in Genesis. That's a story of Abraham and Sarah and their children. We are at the time of Moses, which is approximately in the year, around the year 1200 of the Common Era. And here we see God reintroducing God's self to Moses, connecting back to the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and telling once again, Moses, go forward. Your speech impediment is not going to be a problem. Your brother Aharon is going to speak for you, and you will be able to deliver a strong message to Pharaoh. And the message of this Parashat Va'era, are the 7 plagues, the first 7 plagues. The first one is not a plague. The first one is just to show off how Moses can take his rod and throw it on the floor, and that will turn the rod into a serpent. The magicians from Pharaoh were able to do the same. But then Moses' serpent was able to eat the other serpents of the magicians. And according to the commentary, that happened when the serpent of Moses had turned back into his staff, into his rod, and he was able to do that. So that makes it very special. The first one is blood. And according to the commentators we learned last week in our weekly encounters, that occurred as Pharaoh was coming out of the river Nile. So in other words, at that moment when he was coming out, Moses presented himself and turned the entire river into this red color or blood. And the commentators said, what was Pharaoh doing so early in the river Nile? And they bring something a little bit below the waist. But I thought it was kind of funny and interesting, is that Pharaoh presented himself as a divine being to his people, right? And therefore, he could not appear as someone going to the bathroom. He cannot appear as doing whatever bodily functions that the rest of humanity does. So he went to the Nile to relieve himself early on when nobody could see him. Nebuch, Moses was there to see him and to turn that river Nile into blood. According to the tradition, this first plague lasted for 7 days and involved mainly the Nile. The fish died as a consequence of this kind of blood into the water, and that produced a tremendous problem in the entire economy of Egypt. Says the tradition that the miracle was imitated by the king's magicians, and Pharaoh was unimpressed. Then the second plague of frogs, then he urged Moses to intervene. At that moment, he says, okay, I got it. We can't reproduce this, and please remove this plague from us. Some medieval commentators say that these frogs are more like alligators. And there's a big discussion. How could it be alligators in Egypt? But we'll leave it as such. Frog is enough, to bother to be a plague in itself. The third one, the infestation of gnats, completely outmoved Pharaoh. And only the fourth, the swarm of flies. Then the king of Egypt agreed to let the Israelites travel for 3 days into the wilderness to perform sacrifices to God. That's very important to notice. Moses is negotiating 3 days out of Egypt, supposedly with the return back to Egypt. That's easier than to try to negotiate a full liberation of the Israelites to never return. Again, on that one, Moses, prayed for the plague to cease, and then Pharaoh take his words back and does not fulfill his pledge. 3 more plagues at the very last part of the Parsha have little if no effect on pharaohs. A disease wiped out most of the cattle of Egypt. boils broke out of people and beast, and hail came down and destroyed the entire crops of the economy of Egypt. And on those three, Pharaoh didn't say much. Only then, at the very end, with hail, maybe there is a connection. Then the king of Egypt acknowledges that he somehow has made a mistake, and that there is a God. But now it's too late, because the last three are going to come forward, and Pharaoh will witness destruction of his own firstborn son. And that will be on the next Parsha, Parashat Bo. As you see, it's a quite interesting Torah portion when we start reading and the details and the commentaries. I urge you to do that. There are plenty of websites to look in commentaries, and then we can have a dialogue about what the commentaries are saying. I recommend sepharia.org for you to find the sources of Torah, Talmud, Midrash, and everything written about our tradition. It's a great resource for study. I invite you to come to Friday nights through Zoom to our Friday night service at 6 p.m. and then Shabbat morning, a special Shabbat with Life and Legacy. It will be Gerald Gum who's going to present a talk that will be on Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. Until then, I wish you Shabbat Shalom. Take care.